Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we're going to be taking a look at something really interesting.
Hmm.
It's a phrase, Yo-hi-wa-hi.
Okay.
And we're going to be looking at what that means, its connection to the concept of God, and then something that I found really fascinating was a connection to radionics.
That is interesting.
Yeah, it's a very strange connection. And to help us kind of unpack this a little bit and make sense of it, we have our expert here with us, as always.
Always happy to be here.
All right, so let's jump right in.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yohi-wahi. Um, it kind of sounds like something really old and significant. What is it?
Well, you're right. It is old and significant. And as you said, it's a
Yeah.
phrase, yo-he-wa-he, but it's actually more accurately a phonetic representation of four Hebrew letters.
Right.
Yo, he, wa, and he.
Okay.
And those four letters written as euro make up what's called the tetragrammaton.
The Tetragrammaton, that's a mouthful.
It is, but
Right.
it's a mouthful. It carries a lot of weight because it is the most sacred name of God in the Hebrew Bible.
Oh, wow.
And it appears over 6,800 times.
My goodness. So it's a pretty big deal.
Huge, huge deal.
Huge deal. Okay, so if we're looking at this word, or I guess this name, do we know how it was actually set? Like, how was it originally pronounced?
That's a great question, and one that scholars have been debating for centuries because, you see, ancient Hebrew script didn't typically include vowels, so the exact pronunciation has been lost to time.
Oh, wow.
But the scholarly consensus is that it was most likely pronounced Yahweh,
Yahweh.
Yahweh and Jehovah, which you might have also heard is later form that developed.
Okay, so Yahweh, Jehovah, kind of in the same family.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay.
But regardless of the exact pronunciation, what's really important is the meaning behind the name.
Okay, and what is the meaning behind this name?
Well, it comes from the Hebrew verb to be.
To be.
So think of it as encompassing meanings like to be, to exist, even to cause to become. It really points to God's eternal and self-existent nature. And this is actually brought up in Exodus 3:14, where God says to Moses, I am that I am.
Right.
It's that same concept, the idea of a God who is being itself.
Oh, wow. So that's a pretty powerful concept.
Absolutely. And it's no wonder that this name held such immense significance in Judaism.
Yeah, I can imagine. So how was it treated within Judaism?
Well, it was considered so holy that there was a very strong tradition of not pronouncing it aloud.
Wow.
Instead, they used substitutes like Adonai Elohim or Hashem.
Okay.
The high priest would only utter the name once a year in the temple on Yom Kippur.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so only one time a year.
That's the tradition.
Okay, and what about in Christianity? Was it treated the same way?
It was definitely still considered very important theologically. It was God's self-revelation.
Yeah.
But the prohibition against saying it wasn't as strict.
Okay.
You'll often see it rendered as Lord in many English translations of the Bible,
Right.
and it does appear in some mystical Christian traditions as well.
Okay, so this YHWH it's more than just like a title or a descriptor. It's a personal name for God, right?
Exactly. It's a personal and covenantal name, and that distinguishes it from the more general Elohim.
Okay.
Elohim is more about God as creator, but YHWH is about God in relationship with humanity.
Right.
And so this name, it reveals all these different attributes, like we talked about eternality, self-sufficiency, and there are even those who connect it to an Arabic root that means love.
Oh, wow. So you have all of these different meanings packed into this one name.
Yeah, it's really quite profound. And remember, it was this name YHWH that God revealed to Moses at the burning bush.
Right.
That's a pivotal moment in their relationship. And what's fascinating is that this name's influence actually stretches beyond Judaism and Christianity.
Really?
Yeah, you see traces of it potentially in Islam's Allah,
Oh.
in Greco-Roman magical texts, and there's even some thought that other Canaanite peoples might have worshipped a deity with a similar name.
Oh, wow. Okay, so this is a name that has really echoed through history. Okay, so we've talked about this name YHWH with all of this really amazing history and meaning behind it.
Yeah.
So now let's kind of switch gears a little bit to something completely different. Radionics.
Okay.
What is that? Like, how would you describe that to somebody who's never heard of it?
Radionics is this really interesting system of alternative medicine that emerged in the early 20th century, thanks to a guy named Albert Abrams.
Okay.
And the basic idea behind radionics is that all living matter emits these unique energy frequencies.
Okay.
And radionics practitioners, they believe that these frequencies can be detected and even influenced from a distance
Yeah.
using these special electronic devices.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're often called black boxes.
Black boxes.
Black boxes, yeah. And later on, other practitioners like George Delavore, they expanded on Abrams' work, and they started talking about these subtle energies and specific rates for different conditions.
Okay, so you could use this to diagnose and treat people remotely?
That's the claim, yeah.
And I remember reading something about dowsing and something called a witness well.
You're right, dowsing is sometimes used in the diagnostic process, and that often involves a pendulum.
Okay.
And the witness well is a compartment in the device where you put a sample that's connected to the individual, like a piece of hair or something.
Okay, that's fascinating. So what does science say about all of this?
Well, science is pretty clear on this one.
Okay.
The general consensus is that radionics is a pseudoscience.
Okay.
There's no credible empirical evidence to support any of its claims,
Okay.
and it contradicts well-established principles of physics and biology.
So it's not really based in reality.
Not according to science, no.
Oh, okay. And so I imagine like major regulatory bodies don't really recognize this as a valid treatment?
You're absolutely right.
Okay.
You know, there have been rigorous scientific studies, and they haven't found any effects beyond what could be attributed to just chance or the placebo effect.
Okay.
So the FDA and other regulatory bodies, they don't recognize radionics as a legitimate medical practice. And there was actually a really interesting investigation back in 1924 where they looked into Abrams's devices,
Oh, wow.
and they found that they were essentially worthless.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so this is all really interesting stuff, but where it gets really wild and where this connection gets really wild is how does this ancient Hebrew name that we were just talking about get connected with radionics?
It's a strange connection for sure,
Yeah.
but it does exist. You know, in some radionic circles, you see people explicitly linking the Tetragrammaton to their practices.
Okay.
For example, I was doing some research and I found these products that are being marketed that incorporate the Hebrew letters of the Tetragrammaton, and they claim to offer energetic cleansing and protection.
Really? So they're like taking this incredibly holy name and like putting it on like a bracelet or something.
Yeah, it's kind of like that.
Wow.
You know, they're using it in these ways that are definitely outside of traditional Jewish practice.
Okay.
And I even found a book called Discovering Jewish Radionics.
Discovering Jewish Radionics.
That's it. Yeah. And it tries to kind of bridge Jewish spirituality and radionics.
Oh, wow, that's fascinating. So how do radionics proponents explain this connection? What do they see in this name?
Well, some of them view the Tetragrammaton as having this really potent energetic vibration.
Okay.
And they believe that radionics can actually interact with this vibration,
Oh, wow.
you know, and this might tie into some Kabbalistic ideas like gematria, which is this system of assigning numerical values to Hebrew letters,
Okay.
and the concept of Kavanaugh, which is all about intention and focused awareness.
Okay.
So they're kind of taking these ancient Jewish mystical concepts and applying them to radionics.
Right. They're kind of merging those two.
Yeah, and they see the spiritual power of the name as aligning with these energetic principles that they believe radionics is based on.
So it's kind of like they're trying to like amplify the spiritual significance through an energetic lens.
Exactly. And some radionics proponents even go so far as to say that radionics can help deepen a person's spiritual understanding. Yeah. Some even say it can help you understand God's will.
Wow.
And, you know, given that intention is such a key element in radionics, it kind of makes sense that some practitioners would direct that intention towards spiritual goals.
Right. If you believe that intention can manipulate energy, then why not spiritual energy too?
Exactly. And some even see themselves as like conduits for this divine energy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So you can see there's this really big difference in perspective here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, traditional religious views, they'd probably be much more cautious about using a name like this in this context.
Right. It seems very disrespectful.
Yeah. And, you know, skeptics, they'd probably just attribute any perceived effects to psychological factors and the power of belief.
Right.
But from a scientific standpoint, it's important to reiterate, you know, there's just no empirical basis for radionics claims.
Okay.
There's no evidence that it can interact with divine energies or anything like that.
Right.
It's important to rely on evidence-based medical care
Yeah.
and to be wary of anything that promises these kinds of spiritual results without any scientific backing.
Right. So ultimately, we're left with this really interesting juxtaposition between this incredibly ancient and sacred name that has all of this meaning baked into it and this radionics, which is this alternative medicine practice that is really just based on belief.
Right.
And the connection between the two seems to be more symbolic than anything else.
Right.
You know, it's people taking the weight of this name and trying to kind of like I don't know, imbue it into this practice.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
You know, it really speaks to this human desire to find meaning and connection in the universe.
Right. We're always looking for those answers, and we're willing to try all sorts of different things to get them.
Absolutely. And that's something I think is really worth thinking about. What does this enduring fascination with both ancient spiritual symbols and alternative practices like radionics
Yeah.
tell us about ourselves and our search for meaning?
That's a really great question to leave everyone with.
Yeah, food for thought.
Yeah.